Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Brief. This week we're talking about tragedy striking the NFL, Democrats leaking Trump's tax return, the Wall Street Journal exposes wokeness in the federal government, and, per usual, our very online roundup. Let's jump in. Brad, if you can't tell by how I look, I am having a day. Phoenix is trying to kill me or make me kill myself. I'm not sure which plot he has in mind at the moment, but either way, I feel like it's working. He took a giant dump right in front of me this morning, right after we had been outside, on my carpet. The disrespect. I knew I needed to get a girl dog, because this is what men do. They come in and they just crap all over your life.
It's not because he's a boy dog. It's because he's a puppy and you need to train him.
I know. It's on me. I have been working to train him, but I also have had to travel a lot this month unexpectedly. So he needs some stability in his life, I think, some consistency, and I'm sure he'll get it together. I can tell he feels bad. He's been trying to suck up to me ever since. He's been mostly good, laying around, being kind of quiet and reserved, which is not his MO. So hopefully we get back on a good foot, but yeah, it's not been my favorite day so far. How's your day going?
The joys of puppy life, right? I'm doing pretty well. My boyfriend's working nights all week, so unfortunately haven't get to see a lot of him the last few days, but I had my first game for a new soccer team I'm playing on yesterday. We won 3-1, so that was pretty dope. Yeah, and there's not a ton going on. We found some interesting stuff to talk about today. But yeah, so far, so good this week.
Well, you play what the rest of the world calls football, but I grew up like a normal American watching American football, Roll Tide. And today we have to talk about it. We don't talk about sports as much on our channels as probably some other podcasts do, but I do sort of like when there's an opportunity, because I think there's a lot of politics in sports, and politics kind of is a sport for some people. So there are some natural tie-ins. But last night, now I'm not an NFL watcher. I love college football. I'm an Alabama fan. I don't really get into the NFL. But something happened last night where pretty much all of America was watching NFL football for a moment in time. It was Monday Night Football. We are in, I think, the last week of the regular season for the NFL, so it's kind of coming down to the wire for who will be going to the playoffs and to the Super Bowl. And there was a matchup between the Bengals and the Bills. And within the first quarter, I think a little bit more than 5 minutes left in the first quarter, there was what looked to be a pretty rank and file sort of tackle. But what happened shortly thereafter is a man passed out on the field. So we're not going to roll the video. The families actually asked for people to stop sharing it. And to be honest, it's pretty sickening to watch. It really turned my stomach, and I know it was very upsetting for a lot of people. So I'm just going to kind of try to summarize what happened. But basically, there was a tackle between somebody on the Bills named Damar Hamlin and a Bengals wide receiver named T. Higgins. And when I first heard that someone was injured on the field, I wasn't watching the game. I assumed it was something like a brain injury or, with CTE, some of these issues that we increasingly are learning more and more about with the NFL. Or I thought maybe it was just, a really bad hit. But when you watch it, the hit looks like absolutely nothing. The guy is nowhere near his head. Basically, Higgins hits Hamlin kind of in the chest. It kind of looks like his shoulder pad and his helmet sort of hit him right here squarely in the chest. And Hamlin pops right back up. But then about 3 seconds later, he just falls dead backwards. And you can instantly tell by the reactions of pretty much everybody on the field that this is not a rank and file occurrence. I mean, the coaches, the players, they are all, it's just, I've seen people get injured before. The reaction is just on another level. They are rushing to him. They start doing CPR. The players are gathering around. And really for about 9-10 minutes, nobody knew what was going on. They apparently were giving him CPR during that time period, oxygen. He had to have his heart restarted on the field. He reportedly went into...
stopped.
Yes, they said he went into cardiac arrest. And then they pulled an ambulance onto the field to take him to the hospital, which is also apparently pretty rare. I actually was watching the TV at this point, and all the broadcasters were like, we've never seen an ambulance come onto the field. That's how urgent this is. So there was a mad rush to get him to help. The NFL originally told the teams to take 5 minutes and resume play, which is just crazy town to me. I mean, you could tell the players, some of them were crying on the sidelines, like they were visibly shaken up. We didn't know if he was dead in the moment. And to their credit, the coaches were like, absolutely not. The Bengals head coach, who was up in the lead at the moment, he crossed the field, went to the Bills head coach, and they had a conversation, and then they both just pulled their teams and went to the locker rooms. And it then took the NFL.
We should note the NFL is denying that version of events. That was what was originally reported. They're saying that's not how it went down. I guess we don't really know. But I think it was pretty clear once this injury happened, the game was not going to resume.
Well, I disagree with the NFL on that because I was watching live, and that's what all the broadcasters were saying in the moment. So I don't think they were given that bad of intel there on the field. I think the NFL has gotten tremendous pushback on how they handled this, and rightfully so. And we did not know they were going to cancel the game right away. It was in suspension for over an hour before the NFL made a final decision that it would be permanently postponed.
Which is kind of crazy, because how could anyone have expected them to keep playing when they don't even know if their teammate is going to make it or not?
Yeah. That's why I don't buy their version of events. I don't buy that.
Well, they're probably doing PR, but they're saying they didn't say that, and I guess we don't really know.
So we'll say we don't know because we weren't there, but it certainly did not seem that way on TV. So there's a lot we need to dig into here. I thought this was, it was really scary to me. My sister had a best friend in high school named Jake who was going to Clemson. He had been widely recruited by pretty much every team in the Southeast. He was going to be this all-star football player. And his second semester, senior year, I think he was at home, woke up, had a stroke, and was pretty much out for days. They told all of his friends and family he would not make it. He ended up surviving, but he's not ever really been able to talk again ever since. And this was a really tragic event for my family. My sister was very, very close with him, and the rest of his family. And it was horrible just to see, so much opportunity they had at his fingertips snuffed out. And this was, years and years ago. It was back before really we were talking as much about some of these brain injuries and things that can happen to players. And I think I'm like most Americans where football is so normalized. I grew up, everybody around me, all the men played it. We watched it all the time. Nobody really talked about it being like any more dangerous than any other sport. Like, of course you can get hurt, but you can get hurt doing all kinds of things, right? But that was sort of my first big awakening into just how dangerous football could be, and also how things could impact you off the field, right? Jake had many concussions over a period of years, and then had a stroke later on, totally off the field, totally removed from football, but as a result of those injuries he had sustained. And I was reading a bit last night about this. While it's pretty unprecedented to see this kind of injury go down the field, players are often hurt during play, especially at lower levels and the college level. The New York Times said Hamlin's was the latest of a slew of high-profile injuries, though, that occurred this season and that have prompted fresh criticism of the NFL over player safety. On Sunday, Indianapolis Colts quarterback Nick Foles left a game after being sacked by the Giants linebacker. The linebacker was apparently celebrating, and Foles started convulsing on the field. He was carted off as well, but it was listed as a rib injury, which is sus. They also said on September 29th, Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, I should be able to say this, he played for Alabama. Tagovailoa was transported to the hospital after slamming his head against the turf in a game against the Bengals. He immediately raised his hands and his fingers were splayed, a gesture called a fencing response that can be a sign of a brain injury. And they went on to list several other major injuries that have occurred just this season. Apparently, there's only ever been one player who has died on the field, though, and that happened back in the 1970s. So what are your thoughts, Brad? I mean, I know you don't follow football like I do. Are you aware of some of this that goes on? What's your perception of football?
Yeah, I've definitely learned more about it with the whole CTE, the long-term brain issues from repeated concussions that, players often experience once they retire that lead to mental health issues, suicide, all sorts of terrible things. I think it's a hard one because these athletes are signing up for what they know is a very physical and brutal game. But I think, unfortunately, the NFL was very resistant and tried to cover up a lot of this for a long time. I think they've gotten better, but I think they didn't have the full facts about what they were risking when they went into this line of work. Because if people knew that their brain would be forever damaged in many cases, or that they would have these CTE issues, if they knew that ahead of time and chose the risks, that would be one thing. But a lot of these players didn't know about this when they started down this path. And so I think there's a real reckoning to be had on that issue. I guess just to put it in my context, I don't think I would let my kid play football with what we know now, at least not contact football at a later age. My dad actually played college football, and he ended up with debilitating back issues the rest of his life. And so he never let any of us kids play football. I played soccer as a kid. in part because he didn't really want us to have to live like that. And I think football is, a quintessential American sport. There's something amazing about it, but ultimately, like, people are more important. And there are lots of forms of sport out there that don't involve this kind of level of risk. So I think we may start to see it fade over time. And I'm not so sure that would be a bad thing.
Yeah, I feel like increasingly football has had, and really just in the past decade, kind of a limelight on it because it is uniquely dangerous compared to other sports. I really think it and hockey are probably the two most dangerous. And as I'll get into in just a minute, they really were suppressing and maybe even skewing the research into some of this as early as recently as 2012. And I think that as people are learning more about it, it's like, yes, if you've already put your whole life into this, you're in the NFL, like I understand why you don't just, cold turkey quit. But I'm with you. No kid of mine would be playing these sports. Absolutely not worth it whatsoever. My dad also played high school football and had such bad injuries. He could opt between track and football for a scholarship in college, and he picked track even though he hated it because of how badly his body was already damaged from it. So I was really glad. I have two younger brothers. I was always glad they didn't play football growing up. It would make me very nervous, and it's kind of shocking to me that people continue to seek it out knowing what we're knowing now versus a couple decades ago. And I did do a little bit more research into this. And I want to say, I think not only has there been a lot of cover up around just how damaging these brain injuries can be, the NFL also has funded some of the studies into head injuries, which is just, I don't like it. I think that is a definite alarm. I found this report in New York Times also in 2012. The NFL announced it would donate $30 million to our friends at the National Institutes of Health, that's Fauci's organization, for quote, quote, unrestricted independent research, but then tried to stop the Institute from awarding more than half of the money to a neuropsychologist and BUCTE research group. The NIH ended up paying for the study independently because of that interference. But it does make you question what other studies have they funded, what else have they been a part of, just how good is the research that we're getting into all of this. We still don't really know. But I think that compounded with issues people have with the NFL at large are really starting to weigh on, at least on professional football, right? I think college football's base is still going strong. It's such a big part of the culture down here in the South, but the NFL is increasingly falling under scrutiny. They also got a ton of pushback for how they handled a lot of the BLM stuff, in the past decade or so as well. I know a lot of people on the left have quit watching them because of that.
And people on the right. They've managed to piss off just about everybody.
They actually made everybody angry with how they responded to that. A lot of people on the right have issues with it. I hate how much corporate welfare that they get. I think that's really corrupt.
To build the stadiums all the time. Because they need subsidies. Yeah.
Right. The Tennessee Titans are getting another huge subsidy I just saw recently, and they funded their last stadium, and now they already need, bigger and better. That's always something else, and I'm tired of the welfare queens in the NFL. I don't like how they handle all the criminal justice stuff at the time. I actually was involved with some talks. I don't know if I'm allowed to really say, so I guess I'll keep that kind of private. But I was involved with some talks with a specific team during that time and saw internally the workings of how they were really just trying to silence their players and tamp down any dissent. And really it was gross to watch. I didn't appreciate how that was being handled internally at all. So I also don't care for the NFL. And the last thing I'll say is they're very intertwined with gambling. And I'm not somebody who thinks gambling should be outlawed. I think it's a vice that people have their own decisions to make. But I think gambling is a horrible, horrible thing. I think it's highly addictive. I think it ruins people's lives. And I think that things like, these football, what do you call it? that people play fantasy football, that all these guys are doing every weekend. I just think it normalizes gambling in a way that I don't think is healthy culturally. So yeah, as a whole, I don't really have favorable things to say about the NFL. Take. I know it kind of is, but I'm a pastor's kid. I will say this: people are always surprised. My dad gets high-key mad about two things more than almost any other sin or vice, and they are pornography and gambling. And that's because he has seen so many people's lives ruined, so many families ruined by those things. That I literally he doesn't get that worked up over heroin. He gets majorly worked up because these are normalized, really harmful things in our culture, and so they impact so many more people, I think, than things like heroin that get raised up, which are also terrible, of course. But I don't know. I really do think gambling is a really very bad thing. And so, yeah, I don't have a lot of favorable things to say about the NFL at large. And I didn't like how so far they've seemed to have responded to this incident. Whether or not it's true that they asked the players to keep playing, I'm not sure. But just the PR around it in general, you would have thought there would have been more statements, more communications, more, I don't know, just something. And it seemed really lackluster how they stepped in. It really seemed instead the players were leading the response to this.
Another response that was really unfortunate was the way that a lot of people on social media, including political commentators, they jumped to immediately politicize this Damar Hamlin injury and make it an anti-vax conspiracy thing. And I thought this was really gross. You had, social media accounts, but also big influencers like Charlie Kirk immediately saying, oh, he collapsed suddenly, must be the vaccine, when they don't even know if he was even vaccinated or not. This man is literally fighting for his life. His family and friends are all emotionally vulnerable right now, and you're trying to politicize, even though you have no facts, no evidence. You have no idea if he was even vaccinated, or if he was, if it had anything to do with what he experienced. Much more likely is something that can happen when you're hit directly in the chest, very rare thing, where your heart can stop. And there's been a lot of people speaking out about this. And it's just gross because I feel like they are doing this commonly now, politicizing and hopping on to push their message on these isolated incidents with no context and no facts. And it's just really, really gross to use people's serious life-threatening injuries like this. Like, go have your debate off in your corner with the facts and the science or whatever, but don't jump into these unrelated situations and try to take advantage of them when people are feeling at their most vulnerable.
Yeah, I saw a lot of this circulating almost instantaneously last night. I saw a lot of people saying, like, this is increasingly happening to athletes. This is something we're seeing a lot of. And, like, no, it's not, because the world basically stopped when this happened last night. This is not something we're seeing very often. It seems to be a freak accident or event. But I do understand the instincts, not from the grifters like Charlie Kirk, like, right? I just think those people will say anything for clicks. But from the rank and file people, when you cloud everything around vaccines in secrecy, when you cannot have any civil liability for the vaccines, when the companies are basically allowed to do their own kind of shady internal tests and we don't really know who's doing the test or what their results are, when you have the government shut down dissent on social media platforms for people who question it, when you're told over and over how amazing the vaccine is and we increasingly find out it doesn't actually stop transmission, it has these other faults with it, all of that to say, I'm by no means in their camp, but I understand why people do start to have questions or feel conspiratorial about some of this. And then you add on to that people who are online who are grifting off of this, just trying to get clicks and amping it up. It could be confusing for people, and it is really hard to get more information, I think, as a whole. So I understand how these things get going, but I agree it's not the time to politicize a tragedy whatsoever. And I think people need to separate the very real issues around vaccines, where we need more transparency. We need the government to get out of this marketplace entirely if people are ever going to actually trust these things as being safe for them and their kids. But that is separate from this incident, where we really should just be worried about his recovery as a whole.
Yeah, no, I agree. When you try to suppress debate on a topic in this way, you end up pushing it to the fever swamps, and it's still on these people for exploiting it like this. But this is kind of the result of the mainstream, it really not being open to having any conversation. Really, unfortunately, they very clearly oversold the benefits of the vaccine at the beginning. It still obviously has some significant benefits for vulnerable populations, and they also appear to have undersold some of the risks, even though they do appear still pretty rare and minor. They made it sound like they don't exist. There's nothing. You're just a conspiracy crazy, and that's unfortunate, because I think if we just had a more open and honest conversation about all this, people on both extremes wouldn't have been forced into such noxious positions. But now the entire conversation about that issue is just completely toxic and completely tribal. And the result is this kind of really unfortunate and gross politicization of what's just a really heartbreaking incident that Americans are understandably upset about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what the end results of this remain to be unclear. I did see this on Twitter that I thought was a good point. They said canceling the game, if they do, will be the easy part. The hard part comes after, as we try to square the nature of a violent sport with freakishly built athletes has become a national obsession. The NFL has been very lucky for a long stretch on these types of incidents. So we'll see what the fallout continues to be, but we are definitely praying for Damar Hamlin and his family. And I did see that his toy drive that he had out before this happened has now raised over $3 million. So it's nice to see people coming together and trying to make something good out of this tragedy. But when it comes to things that are pretty much wrapped up investigations, let's turn our attention to Trump's stupid tax returns, which it appears the left finally got their hands on, and seems it's a bit of a nothing burger.
Yeah, so this is one of those stories I really struggle to care about, but I'm actually starting to find interesting just because of what a nothing burger it turned out to be. For years, progressives went on about Donald Trump's taxes. And to be clear, he was the first presidential candidate in recent history to not release his tax returns. And I think he probably should have, in the spirit of transparency, like everyone else did. But what the Democrats have done is they've used the power they have through House committees, that is, in an unprecedented way, to get his tax returns and then publish them to the public. Now, you could make some argument that maybe as a committee they have some legitimate reasons to be reviewing them, but there's no reason they need to release them to the public. They just want to embarrass Trump or feed their Democratic base. And so they released these tax returns from when he was president. And it's just funny because there's nothing there. I read CNN had this big list of all the big takeaways, and none of them are particularly big or notable. So here's from CNN. 6 years of Donald Trump's federal tax returns released on Friday show the former president paid very little in federal income taxes the first and last year of his presidency, claiming huge losses that helped limit his tax bill. So according to CNBC, in 2015, Trump and Melania declared negative income of $31 million and taxable income of $0. They paid $640,000 in federal income taxes that year. In 2016, they declared negative income of minus $32 million, and again, $0 of taxable income. They paid $750 in federal income taxes. Trump and his wife then declared a minus $12.8 million in 2017 and paid $750 in taxes. In 2018, they declared 24.4 plus million positive in income, and they paid about $1 million in federal income taxes. The next year, they declared 4.4 million in total income. They paid 134,000 in taxes. And in 2020, they declared a negative income once again, no taxable income, they paid no tax. They actually claimed a refund of 5.47 million. So there's a couple ways to look at this, but it wasn't actually surprising to me, Hannah. I don't know about you, but this is just pretty common tax stuff. When you have losses as a real estate mogul and you have investments that depreciate, you're perfectly allowed under our tax code to write that as negative income and not pay very much taxes on your other income as a result.
Yeah, I mean, listen, all of this goes a bit over my head. It blows my mind that you can have this much in losses. They're reporting millions of dollars in losses, and you're not broke, and you're still flying private, and you're still buying Gucci. Like, I don't understand the world of wealthy people exactly, but I will say I know it happens. I know this is common. I know the tax code is written in such a way. And listen, most people aren't advocating for the tax code, right? Like, they act like, oh, look, all these corrupt people. And it's like, no. We keep asking for a flat tax code. We keep asking for a simplified tax code. We keep asking for something that's more fair and across the board and like on book. Guess who blocks it? It is not your free market capitalist people. Not one bit, baby. So as long as you guys want to keep this kind of tax code in place where you got all these special breaks for people, like, this is what you get. And you can't be mad at somebody for taking advantage of a corrupt tax code that you continue to promote, right? Like, you have to deal with what you're dealt. This is the system we live in. I say you should pay as little in taxes as you can possibly legally get away with. I'm fine with it. And I do think the interesting thing here, above and beyond just like what the numbers show, is that there are all these conspiracies on the left that if you got these tax returns, they'd show something ominous, right? They'd prove he was working with Russia. They'd prove all these, like, no, they didn't prove any of this. Like, I hate the conspiracy theories on the right, but I hate it even more on the left because nobody ever calls them out as the conspiracy theories that they are. And they deserve every bit of mocking and ridicule that they heap on QAnon people.
Yeah, for years, the MSNBC anchors and everybody told us that if we got Trump's tax returns, they'd show collusion with Russia, and that's why he didn't want to release them. Well, we've got them, and there's absolutely none of that. And I just don't get the outrage because, yes, Trump exploited a ton of loopholes in the tax code for real estate and investment losses to pay very little in income taxes, despite being a wealthy guy. But, like, who wouldn't do the same thing? We would all use every legal method in the tax code to pay as little tax as possible. I want as little of my money stolen and wasted as I can do without going to jail. And so does everyone else. So, like, the members of Congress, the Democrats who are raising hell about this, are also the same people responsible for the tax code, who pass the laws and create the loopholes. They just created a bunch more last Congress that allow this kind of thing. So maybe they should do what we've been telling them for a long time and simplify the tax code, get rid of loopholes and most deductions, and then they couldn't complain like this. But I just don't see what, as long as he's not done anything illegal, like, which it doesn't appear that he has from this, I don't see what this was supposed to say. There are a couple other things. It showed that Trump had foreign bank accounts, including in China, but that's just like not really surprising for an international mogul. And then one thing I found funny is we heard nonstop about how the GOP's 2017 tax cuts were just huge tax cuts for the rich. And yeah, sure, a lot of rich people benefited, although so did most Americans. But these tax returns actually show that Trump, his taxes were raised by the GOP's tax reform because it got rid of the state and local tax deduction, or it reduced it rather, which basically gave you a discount on your federal taxes if you live somewhere with high taxes locally. And he, of course, is a New York City taxpayer, so he has high local taxes. So before the tax reform, he was able to use more loopholes, and then the GOP's reform that they call tax cuts for the rich, actually closed loopholes and hurt Trump and made him pay more in taxes. So it's even funny because not only is this whole release a nothing burger, it actually undercuts the Democrats' narrative about all this stuff.
It's absolutely amazing. You'd love to see it. I also just what did you expect to find? That he's like, here, tax me harder, daddy. Let me write you these checks for money I don't have to pay you. No, not even your most fringy, crazy, progressive billionaires do that, right? Like all these people in Hollywood and all these like tech billionaires who run around saying like they want progressive policies, they are free to write the government higher checks if they want to every year. And do they do that? No, because they too don't actually want to fund all the crap they're talking about. They just want other people to have to fund it, and that's what it really comes down to. So this whole thing is just ridiculous. To me, it's on the level of Obama's birth certificate. Like, it is such a wild goose chase conspiracy theory, and I'm kind of happy they got their way and got it just so they can all look like the fools that they are for this ridiculous waste of time.
Well, I will just say this. They've set this precedent, and now the Republicans are going to go after Nancy Pelosi and publish her tax returns, and it's like the Democrats always do this. They break a precedent, they start something, and then when it's used against them a few years later, they'll be crying and whining, and we'll just say, told you so, not smart. But speaking of not wanting to fund waste and crap in the government, well, the Wall Street Journal just released an investigation into all the different diversity trainings and woke nonsense inside the federal government that our tax dollars are funding and financing. And you and I don't cover a ton of the culture war woke stuff all the time, but it's a little different in this case because they're literally doing it with our money. And some of the stuff that they uncovered here from Freedom of Information Act is truly mind-blowing, Hannah. For example, the Department of Veteran Affairs has a genderbread person that they use to describe the spectrum of gender identity and biological sex and sexual orientation. Of course, it's a genderbread person, not a man. And they actually have a diversity training that has sections on pronouns, embracing gender expansiveness. One slide lists terms including gender fluid and pansexual, while instructing people to list their biases in the bias box. Also at the VA, they play privilege bingo, which includes items such as no criminal record, military experience, and married. So I was a little jaw-dropped by this, but what was your reaction?
I think it's on my face right now. I'm looking at this graphic. My biases are against people who do things like this. Like, that's what I put in my biases box. Like, what the heck? Honestly, I'm kind of just hung up here on the fact that they say it's a privilege to not have a criminal record.
That's not what privilege means. Like,
literally what? I mean, listen, I'm the biggest criminal justice reform warrior I know. I think a lot of people have criminal records that should not. I guess maybe you could say, like, okay, if I'm a white person and I smoke pot at a festival and I don't get arrested, and a black kid smokes pot on the side street and he gets arrested, like, maybe in that context it's a privilege, but they don't specify any of that, and they just say it's a privilege to not have a criminal record, which is bogus. Like, it's, that's a personal choice mostly to not have a criminal record. So the VA is apparently not the only agency that is experimenting with wokeness. NASA is also dipping its toe in the water. This says, a NASA training on allyship for executives says that the term, quote, quote, African American is utilized heavily in white spaces, and it can, quote, make black people feel excluded as the term tends to other them. Another NASA slide series explains that inclusive leaders are willing to be uncomfortable in exploring race, gender, sexual orientation, and so forth. Quote, we have been taught to act as if we were colorblind and gender neutral, it adds, but these efforts actually limit us.
Yes, we should be color conscious and actively discriminate.
They also have a tip sheet on microaggressions that gives examples that include, quote, asking an Asian person to help with a math or science problem. I'm sorry, I can't even keep reading. As well as saying that America is a melting pot. What? A slide deck on inclusive language suggests nixing, quote, quote, the poor and substituting people dealing with economic hardship. I need to actually take a minute to take all that in because there was a lot there. One, this whole thing, okay, when they say an African American is wrong, I typically do say black. I think it's more correct because a lot of people who are black in America are not from Africa for many, many decades back, right? Kind of like calling me Irish American. I'm not really. I'm white because America is it's a melting pot. Like, I don't understand. Like,
Triggered.
That is the point.
How dare you?
That is the point, that it is a melting pot and that you basically give up your old identity when you come here and you assimilate and you become part of the cultural whole of America. And that's a great, beautiful, amazing, wonderful, very non-racist idea. And I cannot understand how all of these, and I mean, I guess I do, since I'm saying this, I'm like, the point is to eradicate our founding, right? They hate the Constitution, they hate capitalism, they hate the restraints on government and their own power, and the point is to undermine all of it and to write it all off as racist and problematic so that they can ultimately trash it and get rid of it. That's the only thing that makes sense here because these ideas are beautiful and I can't stand this. And I also am so tired of this idea of like that, yes, I think saying black is more correct, but saying African American is not offensive. Like, I saw somebody online the other day trying to wax poetic and be like, how about we normalize asking white people where they're really from? And I'm like, white people would love nothing more than to tell you where they're really from. White people spend a ton of money doing DNA tests and ancestry. I cannot tell you the number of white homes I've been in where they produce a book that they've paid somebody to write about their family's origins. They love this stuff. My own family has tons of books about the hometowns we're from and our genealogy. People are fascinated about where they're actually from. So it's not offensive to ask black people that. And if you really think so, start asking white people that. And I promise you, they'll talk your ears off for much longer than you actually want to hear them talk about it. So all of this is bogus.
The entire concept of a microaggression is absurd and also kind of condescending. What you're saying is that people of color or other minorities are so mentally and emotionally fragile that small verbal tics can undermine them or hurt them. Like they say, America is a melting pot is a microaggression. First off, no, it's a nice statement and true, but also the idea that these people are so weak and so feeble that like small verbal sayings can emotionally derail them is actually insulting. I mean, I think they're just as strong and resilient as anyone else, and that if you ask the average black American to list their top 100 problems, microaggressions would not make the list. It's basically something invented by woke white people so they can apparently also charge the federal government for very expensive and mostly useless diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings that are largely political Trojan horses and an exercise in self-enrichment and self-aggrandization.
Yeah. Also, I want to point out here that the whole thing, like, don't call the poor. Instead, say people doing the economic hardship. They're still poor. I think that's the point, right? How about you spend your time and money and tax dollars that you're collecting from all of us on helping people not be poor anymore versus these kinds of stupid guidelines that do nothing for anybody who's actually being harmed.
And are they going to change the rich and say people dealing with economic surplus instead? Like, no.
I also love where the Wall Street Journal said, you'd think the agencies would be proud to post all of these materials online where it doesn't require a long wait and a records request to read them. But since they don't, we thought readers might like to see their taxpayer dollars and government values at work, which is a great point. If NASA's so off its rocker, pun intended, that they're spending our money this way, they ought to be proud about it and displaying it. I think it shows that they know this is bogus when they're trying to suppress information about it, and you have to file FOIA requests to even figure out what they're doing behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if they weren't at all ashamed or self-conscious about this stuff, they would be a lot more transparent about it. But instead, they fight tooth and nail to not release it. And it takes huge amounts of resources and lawsuits to often get them to cough up what they're doing with our dollars. And I think that tells you that they know people wouldn't like it if they knew more about it.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. All right, well, let's move on to our very online section now. First up, we have our favorite anti-libertarian, Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire. And he quote tweeted a Reason magazine article that said the exaggeration of what's happening at drag shows and the political response to it give all the hallmarks of a moral panic. And as an article they wrote, he quote tweeted that and said, libertarianism continues to prove itself to be an utterly useless and irrelevant political movement. And I just have to say, if that were true, then I don't know why we are constantly the ire of everybody far right and far left. Like, they spend more time whining about libertarians than they ever do passing bills, period. So I would say that we're not all that ineffective as a whole, because we're definitely under your skin. But I also will say I don't like Reason's headline here, and I disagree that that is necessarily a libertarian take. I think a lot of libertarians are very concerned about kids at naked drag shows, period. And I'm pro drag shows as long as there's not kids there. But, like, that's weird. That's not libertarian. There is a non-aggression principle under libertarianism that includes protecting children from sexualization. So I think Reason's really off base on this, and I don't think it's a moral
But he's just
panic.
taking one article by one person at Reason, and I'm sure many of their other staff wouldn't even agree with this one author who's arguing that the child drag shows is a moral panic and people are worrying about it too much. And again, I disagree. I think, honestly, most libertarians would disagree. So Matt Walsh is strawmanning libertarianism based off one take by one dude, and then wish casting that onto an entire ideology and movement, even though most people actually probably wouldn't take that position. And it's just funny to me because these people, like Matt and like his buddy Michael Knowles, they simultaneously will claim that the reason that the right has failed, in their opinion, over recent decades since Reagan is because it's too libertarian and too heavily influenced by individualism and free markets. And of course, people like you and me look at them and go, what history have you been living through? But yet they'll say that the right has been too libertarian and that's the root of all its problems. And that they'll also say that libertarianism is useless and utterly irrelevant. It's like at some point you've got to choose one, I guess, although consistency isn't exactly Matt Walsh's thing.
Well, you know, if Matt Walsh ever wants to sit down and have an actual debate on libertarianism, we'd be happy to discuss it on a principled basis. I don't think he will, because I think he's still trying to make his audience think that he's some kind of a limited government person that remotely holds their views. And I think probably most people who watch Daily Wire assume that to be true and don't really understand that when he tries to attack libertarianism, he's attacking the basic values of capitalism and limited government and individual liberty, which I don't think they want to be caught actually flagrantly disagreeing with. So I think this is an interesting attack from that camp.
Speaking of interesting attacks, did you know that not all gay men are queers? Because some woke TikToker has decided that you're only a queer gay, which is apparently something people want to be, not me, if you are radical. Take a listen to this.
I will no longer call a person queer if I don't see them participating in queer politic. You're gay, sure, you're gay. That is not the same as queer. If you haven't put a mask on in a week, not queer. You're just not queer. You're not. Queerness is supposed to be radical. It's supposed to be about supporting each other, helping each other, and making sure that we lift up from the most vulnerable of our community. A lot of you gays are not acting like queers right now, so I'm not going to call you queer.
So this was so funny to me because it's like, ma'am, nobody wants to be called queer except you and like a few other fringe people. That was an insult like 5 minutes ago, and most people still don't identify with that label. And I don't think they want your approval or care what you think. Like,
I was about to say, sounds like you're out, Brad.
Oh yeah, I'm
Kicked out of the
definitely
circle.
not queer.
I've never understood actually what the difference is in being a gay person, a lesbian person, or a queer person. Like, I thought queer was
there's no difference. It's just it's like when gay or lesbian or bisexual aren't woke enough or don't get you enough attention or victimhood points anymore, you just call yourself queer, and that's somehow edgier and more oppressed. That's honestly the truth. That's why they do it.
Well, apparently being queer means you have to be a total NPC that follows the crowd, and that makes you radical, because unless you're wearing a mask and doing exactly what the government tells you to do, you're
The mask thing killed me.
You're not radical unless you're doing exactly what the state tells you to do. Man, that is the opposite of what radical has meant throughout all of freaking history. Like, what are you talking about? This whole thing, like, it's such a freaking cult, man. It's such a cult of self-righteousness and, like, feeling like you're elevating others and helping others by wearing a diaper on your face that does nothing to help others or yourself whatsoever, but it makes you feel good. And, I mean, I guess that's all that counts around here. So she can keep her queer club. I think most people are good, including people who are actually queer.
And also this idea that queerness is radical is just, it's interesting to me because most progress in gay rights or whatever has come not from radicalism, but from like bourgeoisie norms, right? The whole successful argument for gay marriage was an argument of assimilation and an argument of like appealing to family values and tradition. Like we want to be included in society. It wasn't a tear down everything, revolutionize society kind of movement, and it succeeded. Meanwhile, this extreme queer ideology that these people like this are pushing is really undoing a lot of progress because they want to pretend science doesn't exist and they want to really push their demands and their fringe views onto everybody. And so I think, no, I'm gay. I don't identify as queer. I don't want to be involved in any of your radical activism. And I frankly don't care what people like this think of me. And I don't think I'm alone in that.
I'm sorry. I refuse to let her have the word radical. Like, I'm sorry. No, radicals oppose the status quo. Radicals oppose the state. Radicals oppose oppression. And you are on the side of the oppressors. Like, get out. Goodbye. Nope. All right, last one. Brad, if you go to the gym, which I know you do, I think you might be fatphobic, according to this TikToker.
What makes somebody fatphobic at the gym? Let's talk about it. Are you going to the gym so you can get a flat stomach? Or are you going to the gym so you can build a stable core and have better posture? Are you motivated to go to the gym so that you can lose weight? Or are you focused on increasing muscle and bone density? Do you only consider a workout good when you feel sore or tired the next day? Or do you look to feel energized and awake after working out? Are you prioritizing leg day because you want your butt to look super delicious? Or is it because you know strong glutes help protect your knees and your back? Wanting to work out does not make anyone fatphobic, but the motivations why you might go to the gym do.
That was absolutely absurd. I mean, it is good to work out for other reasons besides how you look. Like, of course, it does improve your mental state. Of course, it does give you energy. Of course, it is good for your health. But, like, it is totally fine to want to work out to look good, which also it makes you feel better mentally, which also actually increases, like, many things in your life, right? Like, we've often talked about this, and this is, you don't have to be beautiful, but being a well put together, well fit person does usually mean you make more money, does mean people trust you more, does mean you have better job opportunities, does as a whole impact how you move about in society. And you can sit here and complain about that all you want, but it's actually just evolutionary science that's how people's brains work. And so I really can't stand any of this. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look and feel good and for others to think you look and feel good.
No, and she's saying like wanting to lose weight is bad, as if obesity isn't one of the number one killers in our society, as if people aren't getting all sorts of heart illnesses and chronic illnesses because they are overweight. Like, wanting to lose weight in many situations is good for you and something we should celebrate. Like, I always say, never make fun of or laugh at an overweight person in the gym. Support them because they're doing something great, and it's not easy at first. But at the same time, she's like shaming them for wanting to lose weight and wanting to be healthy. And also, it's like, it's okay to want to look good. It's okay to take pride in your appearance. I agree, like, we don't want to go to the opposite extreme and expect everyone to look like an airbrushed magazine model. We have a lot of issues on that too far extreme. But at the same time, let's not pretend like it's a bad thing to take pride in your appearance or want to look good. I think somebody like this, honestly, there's a saying that you can become so open-minded your brain falls out. And that's the sense that I get from this person, combined with the fact that, like, why is she eating a burrito while saying this? Like, this is obviously intentionally trollish. She knows this is going to make the, fitness community really upset and everything. And I guess it worked for that. But unfortunately, it's a toxic message. You see these like body positivity advocates, and this is really sad. I'm not taking any light in this. And then you'll read about them dying from heart disease. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't have been telling them that being 300 pounds is healthy. Like, it's not compassionate to lie to people about science and biology and health, and that's what folks like this are doing. And it's not progressive, it's not social justice, it's toxic and dishonest.
Agreed. Well, speaking of toxic, let's go to our mailbag.
Our
I have a
comments.
question.
No, they're not all toxic.
No, they're not all toxic. But do you feel like, I strongly feel like YouTube is the most toxic comment section.
No,
like,
Facebook. It's got to be Facebook.
Facebook's also pretty bad.
Facebook's worse. YouTube is pretty bad. I'm not going to lie.
But I see a lot of meanies on YouTube. All right. Thin White Axe said, happy birthday to Hannah and the show, and a happy new year to both of y'all. Thank you. Happy new year to you.
Yeah, thanks. Rhett S. said, I taught high school civics and econ for 3 years in Southern California, and it is like slamming a screen door. Sure, I made some noise, but I don't think I made an impact. Well, that's a little depressing, so thank you. Mick Mac said, referring to my crystals, throw those demonic things in the trash.
Demonic? That's a little aggressive.
A little extreme there.
It's just a rock, sir. Dimitri says, fantastic stuff. Love you, Brad.
What are you, Hannah? Chopped liver?
Yeah, well, where am I? Whatever. It's fine. People can have favorites. I get it.
Okay, so then referring to Southwest, somebody commented, Herb Kelleher is rolling over in his grave. That's the former Southwest CEO, I believe, who apparently ran a tight ship, and things have gone downhill under the current leadership, clearly.
That actually explains a lot. In regards to our section on the woman who is selling $400 an hour sessions on how to use a phone, somebody said, gotta love the free market, which is true. Get your money.
We got some pushback from people who were like, it's in demand, it's value, why are you guys mad about it? And I think they were misunderstanding us. Like, I don't blame this woman for getting that bag. I think it's sad that as a society, anyone finds this necessary or worthy of $480 an hour.
Yeah, and also just to clarify, I'm not mad about hardly anything. It takes a lot to get me actually mad and riled up. I just think it's funny.
I think it's funny and slightly depressing about the state of Gen Z.
Yeah.
So Ryan Sears says, wait, I could be charging people to teach them basic life skills. Yeah, honestly, there's a lot in the corporate world that you can do that you'd think, oh, this is really a full-time job or whatever. Like I said, the bigger a company gets, the more bureaucratic it can get, and it can start to have this kind of stuff. And of course, there's always the federal government, and you can sell them diversity and equity trainings for a fat cash at the taxpayer's expense.
That's where the real money is. Kay Miller says, I'm all for rightfully clowning Gen Re when appropriate. At the same time, who are their parents? A lot of y'all millennials handed your kids a smartphone and went to go live your better life, not teaching your kids anything or monitoring their internet so they aren't talking to grooms. Now, I have a problem with the math here, which is that millennials are not the parents of Gen Z.
Unless they got teen pregnancy, maybe.
Yeah, no. I mean, most millennials are, in their 30s right now. Gen Z's in their 20s. The math's not mathing for me, so
well,
Gen
Z can also be, 12, 10, whatever, but I think it's probably possible that there are millennials with Gen Z kids, but not a ton. That would more be the generation above millennial.
Yeah.
So Bad Gator says the blame is on the parents. They pay a phone bill but didn't teach their kids basic things. No wonder they find their way to whack talk. Yeah, whack talk. Yeah, I kind of like that.
I'll take it. Operation Omniverse says, can confirm I do in fact have a fear of phone calls, more so making them, receiving them, but still, I'm with you. I'm still with you. I do it, but I don't like it at all. All right, on to hot takes. Who's up first?
You
Who's
go
on first. Me on first. I had a few this week. I have a lot of things I'm thinking about today, but I'll go with the one I have in the show notes, which is that jealous journalists are kind of the worst. And yes, I am talking about Michael Tracy right now. He went off on this weird tirade last night on our friend Eliza Blue, who we've had on the show. She is a human trafficking survivor advocate. And Eliza, I think, is unique in our space in that, this is just her free time. She does not work in this space. To my knowledge, she does not get paid for her advocacy. This is what she does in her free time. She's passionate, and she's been pretty successful. She's, built a large platform. She's gotten the attention of Elon Musk. She's had some input over Twitter's new policies when it comes to removing child exploitative materials. And this is not a new thing that she's been on. She's been calling for this and calling out old Twitter for literally years since I've known her. And that's usually the case when somebody starts to have success like this. They've been on the grind for a minute and the work finally pays off, and that's happening for her. But I've seen as her platform's been really blowing up in the past month or so, she's getting a ton of weird pushback and hate, mostly from lefties, which is just... I saw somebody last night ask Michael Tracy, is advocacy against the child exploitation of minors a solely right-wing thing? And somebody else was like, yes, which is just...
I hope not.
oof for the left.
No, in the real world,
No,
it's not.
It's not. I know, but I'm just saying, like, that's kind of the perception they're giving online. But he was spouting off. To me, it seemed he was very jealous of her success. He seemed mostly mad that she went on right-wing podcasts. And so I got into it with him. He got very personal, his attacks back on me. And I was just basically saying, like, your facts aren't right here. He was putting out a ton of misinformation about her background and, like, calling her a professional activist, which you could literally do, like, a modicum of basic research.
Pretty sure she waits tables. Like,
yeah, she said multiple times online she makes, like, a little over $15 an hour. So, I don't know. He used to be somebody who I thought was sort of, like, independently minded, and I wasn't like a huge supporter or follower of his, but he's somebody like I at least would read from time to time, and I just lost all respect for him last night. And I can't stand this when you see somebody who's kind of in like the journalism class and somebody starts getting more attention than them or gaining more traction for their work, and it just seems they start seething with jealousy, and it's a gross look.
Yeah, it is a gross look, and I would never publicly attack a survivor without two things. One, a reason to suspect that they were lying or that their story wasn't true. And two, like hard research and facts to support me saying there's something amiss here. And he came to bat with 0 out of 2. And I don't really get why, but he clowned himself.
Well, and also, like, I'm not somebody who says, like, believe all women, but she's not somebody who's trying to press charges or accuse anybody. I don't think she even names names because she probably wants to avoid that whole, like, potential litigation around that. So there is some cloudiness around, like, who exactly her trafficker was, and that's totally up to her if she doesn't want to come forward with that, right? People are in danger often if they come forward with the names of their rapists and traffickers. There's all kinds of reasons that a victim might not be completely forthcoming with every detail about their background. Why do you care? She's literally just trying to get child exploitation material taken down off Twitter. That really should be the end of the discussion. Go, girl. Go for it. We're behind you. Great job. Keep advocating. I don't understand that at all.
So on a slightly lighter note, my hot take is that grapefruits are the most underrated of the entire fruit kingdom. I love me a good grapefruit juice.
Ugh. Do you put stuff on them? Like sugar?
No, that would defeat the point, because the point is that it's good because it's sour.
It's so sour.
I love sour things. I love warheads.
I was about to say warheads.
Yeah, I love a good warhead. Though those are like, I don't see them anywhere anymore. I don't even know if they're still a thing.
Because they're terrible.
Because they're delicious, but most people have terrible taste.
I like sour stuff. I like pickles, but like I just don't want my tongue to get burned off by it.
Pickles are not sour.
They're tart.
Tart and sour aren't quite the same thing.
Maybe it's not quite the same thing. All right, guys. Well, that's a wrap. We hope you're having an excellent start to your 2023. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Until then, stay based.